In Bremen during the 1910s, work opportunities were largely shaped by the city's maritime and industrial growth, attracting both skilled and unskilled laborers. The Hanseatic city was a major port and shipbuilding center, offering work in those sectors as well as in related industries. Additionally, Bremen was experiencing industrialization, which created new jobs in factories and other businesses. Nearby jute factory, a large part of the parents had come to Bremen in search of work and relocated. Most were eager to ensure their children received a quality education, recognizing that learning was the key to a brighter future. Many of these families enrolled their children in the nearby schools, with St. Mary's Catholic School, Saint-Marien-Schule, standing out as the most popular institution during that era. This school became a cornerstone of the community, welcoming students from various backgrounds and providing a nurturing environment for learning and growth. At that time, St. Mary's was bursting with life. More than 1,000 boys and girls in 22 classes attended the Catholic school. Teachers at St. Mary's played a crucial role in shaping the students' lives. On Friday, June 20th, 1913, a terrible event shook Marienschule in Bremen. Just before 11 a.m., teacher Maria Pohl was preparing her first-grade students for their long break. She had them line up in pairs, ready to leave the classroom. But just as they were about to move, a man rushed up the stairs. She had never seen him before, but he looked agitated, so she started to ask what was wrong. Without a word, the man pushed a Browning semi-automatic pistol into Maria's face. Instinctively, Maria ducked, and when the gun went off, it sent a .9 mm lead pellet at 1,150 feet per second, a quarter of an inch past her right ear. Maria continued her ducking movement, pushing open the door of classroom 8A. She locked the door behind her. Frustrated, the man pushed on the unlocked door of classroom 8B. He burst in upon 60 5- to 8-year-old girls waiting in Mrs. Pohl's classroom. He was the only adult in the room. He opened fire and began shooting. The man was Heinz Jakob Friedrich Ernst Schmidt, a 29-year-old unemployed teacher who had only moved to Bremen a few months earlier in December 1912. His sudden attack caused chaos in the school. Students screamed and ran in every direction as he fired his gun. Tragically, 2 girls were shot and killed in the chaos. As the students tried to escape down the stairs, one girl fell in the crowd and suffered a serious injury, breaking her neck. Meanwhile, some of the younger girls, terrified and desperate, ran back into their classroom where the gunman pursued them. They cried out, "Uncle, don't shoot us," in a heartbreaking plea for their lives. In the midst of the panic, Maria Pohl managed to escape to the nearby boys' classroom. The teacher there acted quickly and wisely. He barricaded the door to keep the shooter out. Then he opened a window and urged his students to jump down from the mezzanine floor into the schoolyard below, guiding them to safety. As soon as the caretaker of the school heard the gunshots, he rushed into the building to help. He quickly approached the gunman, who had been trying unsuccessfully to get into a locked classroom. In a brave attempt to stop him, the caretaker tackled the shooter. During their struggle, the gunman shot him, hitting his jaw and making him lose consciousness. While the caretaker lay on the ground, the gunman, Schmidt, ran up a flight of stairs. From an open window on the landing, he aimed his gun at the boys who were trying to escape in the schoolyard. Tragically, 5 of the boys were struck. The gunfire also hit nearby homes and a construction site, where a roofer was injured in the arm. As Schmidt tried to escape further up the stairs, he encountered teacher Hubert Möllmann. Möllmann bravely confronted him, but the gunman shot him in the chest. Despite being wounded, Möllmann didn't back down. He lunged at Schmidt and managed to tackle him to the ground. However, in the scuffle, Schmidt fired again, hitting Möllmann in the abdomen. Both the caretaker and Möllmann showed incredible courage in the face of danger, risking their lives to protect the students. Their bravery, even while injured, demonstrated the strength of their commitment to keeping the children safe. By then, concerned mothers and fathers had begun running to the school. Neighbouring streets had filled with onlookers, and some had tried to catch a glimpse of the events unfolding from nearby rooftops. Some of the passers-by forced their way into the building in an effort to overcome the killer, who was by then fighting against several people. A coachman who had arrived at the scene finally beat Schmidt down with a pitchfork. In just 15 minutes, the shooting was done. 5 people lost their lives. 3 girls were killed right away, and 2 more died in the hospital over the next month from their gunshot injuries. The police arrested Schmidt and took him to a nearby station. They struggled to keep him safe from a furious mob that had formed, including many parents of students from Marienschule. To push the crowd back, the police raised their guns and swords. The German Empire was busy celebrating the 25th anniversary of the accession to power by his Kaiser Wilhelm II with magnificent military parades as the news from Bremen began circulating through the country's newsrooms. Kaiser Wilhelm was interrupted during it. When he heard about the shooting, he rescheduled the parade, along with all the last kings, highest leaders, and nobles. In the public debate that swiftly ensued after the killings, calls were made for tighter weapons laws in the German Empire. The fact that Schmidt had succeeded in purchasing several Browning pistols and close to 1,000 bullets had outraged many, given that he had long suffered from psychological illnesses that had hindered him from being able to continue his vocation as a teacher. In March and April of 1913, 2 weapons dealers in Bremen told the police they were worried about how many guns and ammunition Schmidt was buying. However, the police investigation didn't go anywhere. After the shooting, it came out that Schmidt's mother had tried to get him admitted to a mental hospital a few months earlier, but she was unsuccessful. Schmidt had been in a sanatorium in May 1911, but was released soon after, supposedly cured. After his arrest, Schmidt would not talk to the police, but information about his past and possible reasons for his actions came out. In a letter from his sister about their sick father, a Protestant minister, he wrote, "The Jesuits did this." Detectives discovered that his father had died the day before the massacre, and Schmidt learned of it from a telegram that afternoon. He also blamed the Jesuits for his father's death in a letter to a doctor in Bremen. Even though Jesuit orders were banned in the German Empire since 1872, conspiracy theories about them continued. Jesuits, along with Jews and Freemasons, were often blamed in wild theories about world control that were common in the German Kaiserreich. 4 days after the tragic shooting, the people of Bremen held a heartfelt memorial service for the victims. 4 small coffins were placed at the front of Marienkirche Church, and every seat was filled. The coffins were decorated with wreaths and surrounded by many candles. After the service, the teachers from Marienschule carried the coffins to hearses outside, and a long procession took the girls to their graves under dark rain clouds. The terrible events from 100 years ago have faded from memory in Bremen. The original Marienschule was destroyed in a World War II bombing and later rebuilt elsewhere. The graves of the 5 girls who were buried next to each other have since been removed. Schmidt, the shooter, was found to be insane, and no trial took place. He lived the rest of his life in a mental asylum in Bremen and died of tuberculosis 20 years later. When he was arrested, Schmidt shouted, "This may be the beginning, but the end is yet to come." He was right. His violent act in Bremen marked the start of a global trend of school shootings that continued over the past century, with cities like Erfurt, Winnenden, Littleton, and most recently, Newtown, also experiencing similar tragedies. In early December 1927, residents of the small Texas town of Farwell gathered at the Hassel farm just outside town. George Hassel was selling most of his family's belongings to get money to join his wife, Susie, and their 8 children in Blair, Oklahoma. However, many neighbors were curious about why Susie and the kids had left so suddenly without saying goodbye. The Hassels had only moved to Farwell 2 years earlier. George was a heavy drinker with a temper, while Susie was a devout Christian who read her Bible every day. Their marriage was unusual. Susie had been married to George's brother Thomas, who had died in a farming accident. George had stayed to help Susie with her 7 children, and they later married. 6 months later, they had a son named Samuel and rented a farm in Farwell. At the auction, neighbors noticed some strange things. One family's wagon wheels sank into the soft ground, suggesting it had been disturbed recently. They also saw a new, poorly built root cellar, which seemed odd since no one would build one just before moving away. Inside the house, they found suitcases filled with women's and children's clothes and Susie's religious books, which she would never have discarded. The auction brought in $3,500 for George. Soon after, new tenants moved in, but George asked to stay a few more days to clean. One night, he told them he felt sick and went to bed early. Minutes later, he called for a doctor and the sheriff. When they arrived, they found George in bed with blood around him from 3 self-inflicted stab wounds. He was taken to the hospital, where he seemed cheerful despite his injuries. Authorities tried to reach Susie to tell her about George, but they discovered there was no Susie Hassel in Blair. This raised suspicions, leading the sheriff to search the Hassel's old home. In the room George had been cleaning, they found blood on the wall behind the suitcases. This alarmed the officers, and they focused on the newly dug root cellar next to the house. When they dug it up, they found the bodies of Susie and her children, carefully wrapped in blankets and still in their nightclothes. An axe lay beneath Susie. Her skull had been crushed, and 2 older boys had been shot. The youngest boy also had his skull crushed. All except the oldest boy had stockings tied around their necks. After leaving the hospital, a weak George confessed, saying, "I did it. I did it." He asked to wait until he felt stronger to make a full statement. Every able-bodied man in Farwell volunteered to dig graves for Susie and her children. During the graveside service, the district attorney spoke, urging the crowd not to act violently. There was a lot of anger among the people of Farwell, and George had to be moved between different jails at night for his safety. Once he felt stronger, George confessed in detail to the authorities and later to a reporter from the Abilene Morning News. He shared that his life had been chaotic from the start. His father had been abusive and killed his mother when George was just 13. After that, George ran away and became a drifter, unable to keep a job because he often stole from employers or customers. He joined the army but deserted to join the Navy under a fake name, only to be caught and serve time in military prison. He also went through several failed marriages, with Susie being his 5th wife. George recounted that on the night of December 5th, he and Susie had an argument. She accused him of having an affair with his 13-year-old niece, stepdaughter, Maudie. He went to the barn, drank some whiskey, and returned home, where they continued to argue. He said he picked up a ball-peen hammer, he didn't know where it came from, and hit Susie in the face twice. Then he strangled her, and when that didn't work, he wrapped a stocking around her neck and finally hit her in the head with an axe. Realizing what he had done, he decided to kill the rest of the family. He started strangling the children with stockings, beginning with the youngest, Samuel, who was just under 2 years old. Next were Nanny Martha, 4, Johnny, 6, and David, 7. When he got to 11-year-old Russell, the boy woke up and fought back, waking 15-year-old Virgil, who also struggled and hit George with a brick. But George managed to get a shotgun and shot Virgil. Russell almost escaped, but George caught him and choked him, then hit him in the head with the axe. His last victim that night was Maudie, the girl he had been accused of molesting. After killing everyone, he dug a mass grave next to the house and waited for Alton, Susie's oldest son, to return from his job in New Mexico. Susie's oldest daughter, 24-year-old Nora, was in California and had planned to return for the holidays, but her trip was unexpectedly delayed. 4 days later, when Alton came home, George told him the rest of the family had gone to visit a relative. He made dinner for Alton, and they stayed up late playing cards. Once Alton fell asleep, George snuck into his room, put the shotgun against his head, and pulled the trigger, splattering blood on the wall. But the most shocking part of his confession was still to come. George had even more to reveal. He told the authorities about another crime he committed a decade earlier in California. He had killed his former common-law wife and 3 adopted children. However, he refused to provide any further details about this case. The Palmer County authorities in Texas reached out to their counterparts in California, but they couldn't find any records matching George's description of the crime. Fortunately, the murders of the Hassel family had gained national attention. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a woman named Gertrude Hoffman was reading the shocking story in her local newspaper. The name George Hassel sounded familiar to her, and when she saw his picture, memories flooded back. 10 years ago, her sister, Marie Vogel, had been living in Whittier, California, with George and 3 children. Gertrude recognized him because she had visited their farm. Not long after that visit, Marie vanished without a trace. The only update Gertrude received came from George, who claimed that Marie had taken the children and moved to Australia. After seeing George's picture in the newspaper, Gertrude quickly contacted the Texas authorities. They then got in touch with the Whittier police, who were able to track down the family using George's work records. Interviews with former neighbors confirmed that Marie and the 3 children had indeed gone missing 10 years earlier. George had told them that she and the kids had moved to San Francisco. However, the neighbors recalled seeing George acting suspiciously the night after they disappeared. They noticed him carrying a heavy trunk into the garage and later hauling out several smaller bundles. For 3 days, they saw him digging in the garage and noticed a strange smell, like burning rags, coming from his kitchen. When confronted with these details, George confessed. He explained that Marie had believed in spiritualism and had visions of treasure buried beneath their garage. She had insisted that he dig up the floor to search for this treasure. Just like with Susie, George claimed he lost his temper during an argument with Marie. He hit her over the head with a club and then choked her to death, first with his hands and then with a rope. He did the same to the 3 children, who were just 8, 3, and 1 years old. George confessed to burying their bodies in the so-called treasure hole, a task that took him 3 days to complete. Since the house had long been demolished, he drew a map of the property, marking the spot where he had buried them. Following his directions, police found the remains of a woman and 3 children. In a gruesome similarity to the Hassel murders, their skulls were crushed, and each of them had a rope around their neck. On January 26, 1927, George Hassel's trial began. Although he had confessed to killing 13 people, he was only charged with the murder of his stepson, Alton. The towns of Farwell, Texas, and its neighbor across the New Mexico border, Texaco, became lively and bustling, almost like a carnival. Many people flocked to the trial, eager to see the proceedings. George pleaded guilty and even asked for the death penalty, but the jury needed to determine his mental state. Several psychiatric experts examined him and diagnosed him as a sociopath, but that wasn't enough for him to claim an insanity defense. The jury took just 30 minutes to find him guilty and then spent 2 hours deciding on his punishment: death by electrocution. When the judge announced the sentence, George calmly replied, "Thank you, Your Honor." California, learning that Texas planned to execute him, decided not to pursue charges for the murders he committed there. While in prison, George was known as a model inmate. He was always cheerful and enjoyed making jokes. He created doilies as gifts for visitors, fellow inmates, and even the jury members who sentenced him to death. He claimed that his time in prison was the best of his life. When asked why he had killed his victims, George said he didn't really know. He pointed to his head and said, "Something was wrong up here," suggesting he felt he had mental issues. On February 10, 1928, George was taken to the electric chair at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. He appeared calm and even smiled as he faced the end. His last words expressed that he was ready to meet his maker. It took 3 electric jolts to finally end his life, and he was declared dead at 12:29 a.m. His body was buried in the cemetery at Huntsville Prison.